This is The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold, and in my adult life, it is the only book that has ever truly scared me. And I've determined that that is in part due to the author flipping everything that I thought I knew about how to make things scary on its head. And I think it's because making fiction scary is hard. This has been kind of a quiet obsession of mine over the past couple years, looking at how writers and filmmakers, different types of storytellers, cross what I've started calling the spectator gap. What I mean when I say spectator gap is the understanding that whatever they're about to see or read is not happening to them and not real. This is the number one problem that writers and filmmakers in the horror space run into, is that our monkey brains naturally go, scary clown eating kids, scary. But scary clown not eating me. Also, scary clown not real. Believe it or not, it's actually really hard to convince an audience's monkey brains that they are in danger when objectively they are not in danger. I've seen writers and filmmakers deal with this problem in pretty much 3 ways, and I promise we are going to get to Scary Book in a second. Just, this is all going to come back around at the end. Bear with me. A, jump scaring the viewer. Showing the viewer something scary or shocking that wasn't expected to release a strong but very short fear response in the viewer. Example, Smile. Jump scary movie, not scary movie though. B, getting really graphic and disturbing with it. Showing the viewer or reader something really disturbing and gross that will stick with them. This can have a similar effect to a jump scare. It's not as strong, but it does last longer. An example of this is like The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. Super gross, disturbing book. Not really a scary book though. C, third, building up the myth and narrative around an extremely powerful evil entity in the face of which we're all helpless. An example of this is like the Call of Cthulhu. Super interesting, very compelling story, but not a scary story. This book works by flipping those 3 conventions on their heads. So A Short Stay in Hell is anxiety inducing, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things is suspenseful and weird, and Tender as the Flesh is disturbing and subversive. But in my adult life, I've never had a book have me checking over my shoulder to make sure I'm alone while I'm reading it. Nothing's ever kept me up at night. Nothing's ever had me double checking locks before I go to bed. Nothing's ever made me set it down because I think I'm like starting to have a panic attack, until I read the first chapter of this book. I'm going to read this chapter to you. It's about 15 pages long. Bear with me. It's worth it. My name was Salmon, like the fish. First name, Susie. I was 14 when I was murdered on December 6, 1973. In newspaper photos of missing girls from the 70s, most looked like me. White girls with mousy brown hair. This was because before kids of all races and genders started appearing on milk cartons or in the Daily Mail, it was still back then when people believed things like that didn't happen. In my junior high yearbook, I had a quote from a Spanish poet my sister had turned me on to, Juan Ramon Jimenez. It went like this: if they give you ruled paper, write the other way. I chose it both because it expressed my contempt for the structural surroundings a la the classroom, and because, not being some dopey quote from a rock group, I thought it marked me as literary. I was a member of the chess club and the chem club, and burned everything I tried to make in Mrs. Delmenicchio's home ec class. My favorite teacher was Mr. Body, who taught biology, and liked to animate the frogs and crawfish we had to dissect by making them dance in their waxed pans. I wasn't killed by Mr. Body, by the way. Don't think every person you're going to meet here is suspect. That's the problem, you never know. Mr. Body came to my memorial, and, as may I add, did almost the entire junior high school. I was never so popular. And I cried quite a bit. He had a sick kid. We all knew this. So when he laughed at his own jokes, which were rusty way before we had him, we laughed too, forcing it sometimes just to make him feel happy. His daughter died a 1.5 years after I did. She had leukemia, but I never saw her in my heaven. My murderer was a man from our neighborhood. My mother liked his border flowers, and my father talked to him once about fertilizer. My murderer believed in old-fashioned things like eggshells and coffee grounds, which he said his own mother had used. My father came home smiling, making jokes about how the man's garden might be beautiful, but it would stink to high heaven once a heat wave hit. But on December 6, 1973, it was snowing, and I took a shortcut through the cornfield back from the junior high. It was dark out because the days were shorter in winter, and I remember how the broken corn stalks made my walk more difficult. The snow was falling lightly, like a flurry of small hands, and I was breathing through my nose until it was running so much I had to open my mouth. 6 feet from where Mr. Harvey stood, I stuck out my tongue to taste a snowflake. "Don't let me startle you," Mr. Harvey said. Of course, in a cornfield, in the dark, I was startled. After I was dead, I thought about how there had been a light scent of cologne in the air, but I had not been paying attention, or thought it was coming from one of the houses up ahead. "Mr. Harvey," I said, "you're the older Salmon girl, right?" "Yes." "How were your folks?" Although the eldest in my family and good at acing a science quiz, I had never felt comfortable with adults. "Fine," I said. I was cold, but the natural authority of his age and the added fact that he was a neighbor and had talked to my father about fertilizer rooted me to the spot. "I've built something back here," he said. "Would you like to see?" "I'm sort of cold, Mr. Harvey," I said, "and my mom likes me home before dark." "It's after dark, Susie," he said. I wish now that I had known this was weird. I'd never told him my name. I guess I thought my father had told him one of the embarrassing anecdotes he saw merely as loving testaments to his children. My father was the kind of dad who kept a nude photo of you when you were 3 in the downstairs bathroom, the one guests would use. He did this to my little sister, Lindsay, thank God. At least I was spared that indignity. But, as it turned out, my father had not mentioned us to Mr. Harvey. Mr. Harvey would later say these words to my mother when he ran into her in the street. "I heard about the horrible, horrible tragedy. What was your daughter's name again?" "Susie," my mother said, bracing up under the weight of it, a weight she naively hoped might lighten someday, not knowing it would only go on to hurt in new and varied ways for the rest of her life. Mr. Harvey told her the usual. "I hope they get the bastard. I'm sorry for your loss." I was in my heaven by that time, fitting my limbs together and couldn't believe his audacity. "The man has no shame," I said to Franny, my intake counselor. "Exactly," she said, and made her point as simply as that. There wasn't a lot of bullshit in my heaven. Mr. Harvey said it would only take a minute, so I followed him a little farther into the cornfield, where fewer stalks were broken off because no one used it as a shortcut to the junior high. My mom had told my baby brother, Buckley, that the cornfield was inedible when he asked why no one from the neighborhood ate it. "The corn is for the horses, not humans," she said. "Not dogs?" Buckley asked. "No," my mother answered. "Not dinosaurs?" Buckley asked, and it went like that. "I've made a hiding place," said Mr. Harvey. He stopped and turned to me. "I don't see anything," I said. I was aware that Mr. Harvey was looking at me strangely. I'd had older men look at me that way since I'd lost my baby fat, but they didn't usually lose their marbles over me when I was wearing my royal blue parka and yellow elephant bell-bottoms. His glasses were small and round with gold frames. His eyes looked out over them and at me. "You should be more observant, Susie," he said. I felt like observing my way out of there, but I didn't. Why didn't I? Franny said these questions were fruitless. "You didn't, and that's all. Don't mull it over. It does no good. You're dead, and you have to accept it." "Try again," Mr. Harvey said, and he squatted down and knocked against the ground. "What's that?" I asked. My ears were freezing. I wouldn't wear the multicolored cap with the pom-pom and jingle bells that my mother had made me one Christmas. I had shoved it in the pocket of my parka instead. I remember that I went over and stomped on the ground near him. It felt harder even than the frozen earth, which was pretty hard. "It's wood," Mr. Harvey said. "It keeps the entrance from collapsing. Other than that, it's all made out of earth." "What is it?" I asked. I was no longer cold or weirded out by the look he had given me. I was like I was in science class. I was curious. "Come and see." It was awkward to get into. That much he admitted once we were both inside the hole. But I was so amazed by how he had made a chimney that would draw smoke out if he ever chose to build a fire that the awkwardness of getting in and out of the hole wasn't even on my mind. You could add to that escape wasn't a concept I had any real experience with. The worst I'd had to escape was Artie, a strange-looking kid whose father was a mortician. He liked to pretend he was carrying a needle full of embalming fluid with him. On his notebooks, he would draw needles spilling dark drips. "This is neato," I said to Mr. Harvey. I completely reverted. I was my brother Buckley on our day trip to the Museum of Natural History in New York, where he'd fallen in love with the huge skeletons on display. I hadn't used the word neato since public elementary school. I can still see the hole like it was yesterday. And it was. Life is a perpetual yesterday for us. It was the size of a small room, the mud room in our house, say, where we kept our boots and slickers, and where Mom had managed to fit a washer and dryer one on top of the other. I could almost stand up in it, but Mr. Harvey had to stoop. He'd created a bench along the sides of it by the way he dug it out. He immediately sat down. "Look around," he said. I stared at it in amazement. The dugout shelf above him, where he had placed matches, a row of batteries, and a battery-powered fluorescent lamp that cast the only light in the room, an eerie light that would make his features hard to see when he was on top of me. There was a mirror on the shelf, and a razor and shaving cream. I thought that was odd. Wouldn't he do that at home? But I guess I figured a man who had a perfectly good split level and built an underground room only a half a mile away had to be kinda Lulu. My father had a nice way of describing people like him. The man's a character, that's all. So I guess I was thinking that Mr. Harvey was a character. And I liked the room, and it was warm, and I wanted to know how he had built it, what the mechanics of the thing were, and where he'd learned to do something like that. But by the time the Gilbert's dog found my elbow 3 days later and brought it home with a telling corn husk attached to it, Mr. Harvey had closed it up. I was in transit during this. I didn't get to see him sweat it out, remove the wood reinforcement, bag any evidence along with my body parts, except that elbow. By the time I popped up with enough wherewithal to look down at the goings-on Earth, I was more concerned with my family than anything else. My mother sat on a hard chair in the front door with her mouth open, her pale face paler than I had ever seen it, her blue eyes staring, and Mr. Harvey asked me if I would like a refreshment. That was how he put it. I said I have to go home. "Be polite and have a Coke," he said. "I'm sure the other kids would." "What other kids?" "I built this for the kids in the neighborhood. I thought it could be some sort of clubhouse." I don't think I believed this even then. I thought he was lying, but it was a pitiful lie. I imagined he was lonely. We had read about men like him in health class, men who never married and ate frozen meals every night and were so afraid of rejection they didn't even own pets. I felt sorry for him. "Okay," I said. "I'll have a Coke." In a little while, he said, "Aren't you warm, Susie? Why don't you take off your parka?" I did. After this, he said, "You're very pretty, Susie." "Thanks," I said, even though he gave me what my friend Clarissa and I had dubbed the skeevies. "Do you have a boyfriend?" "No, Mr. Harvey," I said. I swallowed the rest of the Coke, which was a lot, and said, "I gotta go, Mr. Harvey. This is a cool place, but I have to go." He stood up and did his hunchback number by the 6 dug-in steps that led to the world. "I don't know why you think you're leaving." I talked so that I would not have to take in this knowledge. Mr. Harvey was no character. He made me feel skeevy and icky now that he was blocking the door. "Mr. Harvey, I really have to get home." "Take off your clothes." "What?" "Take your clothes off," Mr. Harvey said. "I want to check that you're still a virgin." "I am, Mr. Harvey," I said. "I want to make sure. Your parents will thank me." "My parents? They only want good girls." "Mr. Harvey," I said, "please let me leave." "You aren't leaving, Susie. You're mine now." Fitness was not a big thing back then. Aerobics was barely a word. Girls were supposed to be soft, and only girls we suspected were butch could climb the ropes at school. I fought hard. I fought as hard as I could to not let Mr. Harvey hurt me, but as hard as I could was not hard enough. Not even close. And soon I was lying on the ground, in the ground with him on top of me, panting and sweating, having lost his glasses in the struggle. I was so alive then. I thought, this is the worst thing in the world, to be lying flat on my back with a sweating man on top of me, to be trapped inside the earth and have no one know where I was. I thought of my mother who would be checking the dial of the clock on her oven. She would be worried, more angry than worried at my lateness. As my father pulled into the garage, she would rush about, fixing him a cocktail, a dry sherry, and put on an exasperated face. "You know junior high," she would say. "Maybe it's a spring fling." "Abigail," my father would say, "how can it be a spring fling when it's snowing?" Having failed with this, my mother would rush Buckley into the room and say, "Play with your father," while she ducked into the kitchen and took a nip of sherry for herself. Mr. Harvey started to press his lips against mine. They were blubbery and wet, and I wanted to scream, but I was too afraid and too exhausted from the fight. I had been kissed once before by someone I liked. His name was Ray, and he was Indian. He had an accent and was dark. I wasn't supposed to like him. Clarissa called his large eyes with their half-closed lids freakadelic, but he was nice, and he was smart, and he helped me cheat on my algebra exam while pretending he hadn't. He kissed me by my locker the day before we turned in our photos for the yearbook. When the yearbook came out at the end of the summer, I saw that under his picture he had answered the standard "My heart belongs to" with Susie Salmon. I guess he had had plans. I remember that his lips were chapped. "Don't, Mr. Harvey," I managed. And I kept saying that one word a lot. Don't. And I said please a lot too. Franny told me that almost everyone begged please before dying. "I want you, Susie," he said. "Please," I said. "Don't," I said. Sometimes combine them, "please don't," or "don't please." It was like insisting that a key works when it doesn't, or yelling, "I've got it, I've got it, I've got it," as the softball goes sailing over you into the stands. Please don't. But he grew tired of hearing me plead. He reached into the pocket of my parka and balled up the hat my mother had made me, smashing it into my mouth. The only sound I made after that was weak tinkling of the bells, as he kissed his wet lips down my face and neck, and then began to shove his hands under my skirt. I wept. I began to leave my body. I began to inhabit the air and the silence. I wept and struggled so I would not feel. He ripped open my pants, not having found the invisible zipper my mother had artfully sewn into their sides. "Big white panties," he said. I felt huge and bloated. I felt like a sea in which he stood and pissed and shat. I felt the corners of my body were turning in on themselves and out, like in Cat's Cradle, which I played with Lindsay just to make her happy. He started working himself over me. "Susie, Susie," I heard my mother calling. "Dinner is ready." He was inside of me. He was grunting. "We're having string beans and lamb." I was a mortar. He was a pestle. "Your brother has new finger painting, and I made apple crumb cake." Mr. Harvey made me lie still beneath him and listen to the beating of his heart and the beating of mine, how mine skipped like a rabbit, and how his thudded a hammer against cloth. We lay there with our bodies touching, and, as I shook, a powerful knowledge took hold, that he had done this to me and I had lived. That was all. I was still breathing. I heard his heart. I smelled his breath. The dark earth surrounding us smelled like what it was, moist dirt where worms and animals lived their daily lives. I could have yelled for hours. I knew he was going to kill me. I did not realize then that I was an animal, already dying. "Why don't you get up?" Mr. Harvey said as he rolled to the side and then crouched over me. His voice was gentle, encouraging, a lover's voice on a late morning, a suggestion, not a command. I could not move. I could not get up. When I would not, was it only that? Only that I would not follow his suggestion? He leaned to one side and felt, over his head, across the ledge where his razor and shaving cream sat. He brought back a knife. Unsheathed, it smiled at me, curving up in his grin. He took the hat from my mouth. "Tell me you love me," he said. Gently, I did. The end came anyway. Well, that wasn't very much fun. I've revisited that scene probably a half a dozen times since I first read it a couple years ago, and every time it gets to me. Originally, when I wrote the notes for this video, I was going to take this part of the video to talk about the mechanics of the scene, and how Alice Sebold subverts those three categories that I mentioned earlier in the video. But I finished reading the book and I looked over the next page or so I had of notes, and it felt inappropriate to talk about something like this, especially knowing that it's based on the actual experiences of the author, and analyze it in the way that, you know, I might analyze an episode of Breaking Bad or a Bob Dylan album. It feels inappropriate to talk about this as though it's a form of entertainment, even though it is. I'll touch on them briefly. There are no jump scares in this scene. You can't jump scare somebody in a book, but also there's no big reveal, big reversal of fortune where everything changes. We know what's going to happen from the very beginning. And the writer makes you sit there and experience it with her at walking pace. Second, a lot of horror writing or filmmaking approaches a scene like this in one of two ways. One concedes a kind of guilty pleasure to the reader in viewing disturbing or graphic things. The writer kind of winks at the reader and goes, I know what you're here for, and I'm gonna give it to you. And don't worry, your secret is safe with me. And the point of view from which the audience witnesses these things often has more in common with the attacker's point of view than the victim's. The term that gets used to criticize this kind of writing or filmmaking sometimes for being overly gratuitous or exploitative is torture porn. The other approach that people take is a kind of a fade to black, which is to not explicitly show these graphic, disturbing things on the page, but to, come back to it and show evidence. Often they show the after effects and trust the audience to put the pieces together. What the author in the scene does is she makes us experience Susie's rape and murder from Susie's perspective. It isn't sensationalized, it isn't stylized violence, it's a slow descent into dread as we watch Susie realize what we all know is going to happen. It records her thoughts and her reactions to things and forces the reader to experience it with her. I think this is a big part of what made this scene affect me deeply. I also think that portraying things like this through a point of view that mimics that of the attacker as a concession to the audience is extremely disrespectful to victims of extremely violent crimes like Susie's. And I think that this way of framing it is a way that is not, there is no way to interpret this scene as erotic or stylistically violent or fun or in any way. There is no way to enjoy reading this scene. And third, finally, Mr. Harvey isn't a mythic, unstoppable force. He's not Jaws or the disease in the stand. He's right there. And he's a real and complex person with his own stories and his own wants and his own desires. And he's choosing to do this not because he's a supernatural force or an evil force of nature that we'll never understand. He's doing it because he wants to and he can. And there is nothing Susie can do to stop him. And I think that's what about this scene really got to me. The thing about me is, I'm a dude. I'm 5'11", I'm 185 pounds, I work out, I was a regionally ranked boxer in high school. I'm not generally scared of people because the percentage of people that I see in a day that are meaningfully that much bigger than me is extremely low. So I've gotten into strangers' cars and I've slept on strangers' couches and I've slept out in the open, in the outdoors by myself, and I've wandered cities at night because I think this is a normal male experience. I'm not scared of people. And so being forced into the point of view of a 14-year-old girl who is in the presence of an adult man and realizing that you are totally at the mercy of someone else, having the thought, I hope this guy is a good guy because if he tries anything, there is literally nothing that I could do to stop him, was really foreign and distressing to me. The line that gets to me is when Susie has taken her parka off and she's drinking her Coke and Mr. Harvey goes, "You're very pretty, Susie." Because when you're a 14-year-old girl who's alone with an adult man that you don't know, you're having the thought like, well, I really hope he's not thinking about the thing. And with that line, Mr. Harvey confirms, I am very much thinking about the thing. And I think that's where Susie starts to really confront the fact that she is in danger. Often my benchmark for really good writing is I say, good writing will unpack your life and explain it to you. It'll give you language for something that maybe you knew but you'd never been able to put into words before. This book did not do that for me. This book is a different kind. I think when people talk about, I think good writing can also be translative, meaning it can unpack parts of someone else's life and explain it to me. This is not an experience that I have. This is not a fear that I have. This is not something I had any experience with. But having read it, and you go through the scene through Susie's point of view, and you feel part of the fear that she felt, you gain a greater appreciation for people who have life experiences that aren't yours. I don't really have a conclusion for this video. It feels a little bit crass to take something like this that's deeply tragic and disturbing, and to me real, and look at it through the lens of entertainment. And I hope that I've handled it in a way that is respectful to the source material. And if I might just take this video down later if I change my mind. It felt a little bit like writing a literary critique of the eulogy somebody delivered at their grandmother's funeral. But I wanted to make this video because this is something that I'm passionate about. And not passionate maybe in a good way, but this is something that affected me and expanded me and caused me to understand something about people that aren't me, that I didn't understand before. And I think that we have an obligation to talk about the art that expands us, that expands our perspective. I want to drive people to read this book, or at very least to read this chapter and to think deeply about it. This chapter put me in very foreign shoes and gave me an experience that I will never have. And I think that's valuable. Art can be transformative. It transforms its maker, and in exceptional cases, it can transform its audience. Thank you for watching.